Smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, we are thrilled to present two rock stars, both possessing impressive resumes from the music business, as well both being faculty members at the Berklee School of Music. I promise you will leave today smarter and more inspired than you arrived. More on that in just a moment. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people in the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And please ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as we can during the interview. And also, please make sure your chat is set to address speakers and attendees. I want to thank our program sponsors for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, Four Roses Bourbon, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Ralph Jaccodine. Ralph began his career as in music as a musician and concert promoter in Allentown, PA, and then as concert director at the University of Notre Dame. He has worked with artists such as Bruce Springsteen, Kiss, Rush, Hall & Oates, Doobie Brothers, Todd Rundgren, Kansas, Styx, Livingston Taylor, and many others. After running his own downtown Boston commercial real estate company for 12 years, he joined Mike Dries, the co-founder of Newberry Comics, one of the nation's leading retail music chains, in starting Black Wolf Records, an independent record label. In 1992, he started Ralph Jaccodine Management, guiding the career of songwriter Ellis Paul, and then expanded the business working with artists including Livingston Taylor, Shung Ning, Rebecca Loeb, Martin Sexton, the Push Stars, Flynn, Angie Dukavat, the Adam Ezra Group, Johnny A, Works Progress Administration, which is Glenn Phillips, Sean Watkins, and Luke Bulla, Vinx, Avery, Bang, Camero, Amy Black, and Susan Cantanello. Ralph is co-founder of the Boston Management Group, a professional organization started 25 years ago with Tim Collins, the longtime manager of Aerosmith. He has been active on various boards and directors, including International Folk Alliance, Club PASM, Right Turn, and the Hope Collaborative. And he is on the advisory board of WUMB, Music to Life, and has worked with Ernie Bach Jr.'s Music Drives Us Foundation. Welcome, Ralph. So glad you're here. And joining Ralph as today's featured guest is George Howard. George is a JD, MBA, and master's, as a former president of Ryko Disc, the world's leading independent record label, and co-founder of TuneCore, the world's largest independent digital music distributor. He's also the co-founder of Music Audience Exchange, which comprises a team of digital marketers, engineers, and music lovers using technology to redefine the fundamental structure of brand-artist relationships. Currently, George is CIO of Riptide Music Group and CMO of Mood Agent. George is a professor of music business management at Berklee College of Music and is the founder of GHS, a strategic consulting firm that advises a wide range of clients on how to integrate technology with strategy in order to increase brand awareness and revenue. George is a columnist for Forbes, and his most recent book is Everything in Its Right Place: How Blockchain Technology Will Lead to a More Transparent Music Industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome these two rock stars to the smartest people in the room. Please take it away, Ralph.
Wow, all those old bands that I worked with in the past, I'm still alive. It's amazing. Thank you for doing this, Tom. And I'm really excited. When I was exposed to Tom's shows a long time ago when you started, I thought, I know the smartest person in the room, and I share a room with him here at Berklee College of Music. So George and I share an office space. I never see him because he's always flipping around the place and teaching and inspiring and starting companies. But I'm really glad to share George Howard with you as an audience, and thank you for coming. So my degree was in college was economics. So my career has been like microeconomics. So I manage artists and artist. And above George's desk, there's a poster, and it says, "All artists are entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs are artists." And I do believe that. And that's kind of why George and I do what we do, to help the artists out. And so for 30 years, I've managed artists. And for the past 9 years, I've been here at Berklee. And when I was hip to George in the 90s, we had a meeting when he was president of RICO. And I was really impressed with him. And then when I found out about Google Alerts, I put George Howard in there. So anytime George publishes something or he's in the news, I get a notice. But there's more criminals and people in jail named George Howard. I can't believe it. So every day I'm getting news about George, and very few my brother here, but nonetheless, I've been following George. And when Tom said, yeah, Ralph, bring George in, I read his most recent book, and I'll tell you, it has my head still spinning from it. And shame on me for not being hip to this book earlier. It's called Everything in Its Right Place. And I read it in a weekend, and it's changed my perspective on the music industry. So much so that I went to the chair of our department in the music business department and said, "You need to make this required reading for every faculty member in our department." And I've been saying that to my students too. So I want George to, George is on a mission, and he is a truth teller. This past weekend, I was at a funeral, unfortunately, but the burial was about a 20-second walk to a guy named Timothy White. And Timothy White was the editor of Billboard magazine for many years. And, he was called the music industry's moral compass. And I visit his graveyard a couple times a year, and we have these chats, or I talk and I try to listen. And I told Timothy that I'm going to give George Howard, I'm going to pass it on to him. I feel like George is the moral compass, one of the moral compasses, one of the leading moral compasses of the music industry. And then I'm going to shut up. So we're going to talk about two of George's projects. One is called The Song That Owns Itself, and the other one is Aglo Rand, which is a new project that he's involved with, which we'll talk about. But kind of to set off, if nobody knows who George is, shame on you, but nonetheless, I'm going to read you 3 quotes and then we'll get into it, and I'll shut up. Number one is, George talks about his interests is helping artists create a sustainable career on their terms. And then he goes, like, his mission statement is to leverage technology in a manner that results in more artists not simply sustaining, but thriving on their own terms. And then one quote I found in several interviews, which blows me away, and this is my love for George expanded in a big way, when he says, "Art is an empathy machine. More art equals less war." And that's the mission of George Howard. So George, welcome. I like your little chin strap there. That's cool.
I don't know what to do, but thanks a lot. Yeah, it's very too much, too nice. And the opening quote, the thing on my desk, the all artists are entrepreneurs, that's that I learned of that from someone who is truly the moral compass of the record industry, an artist manager named Burgess Downs, REM. He turned me on to Hugh, who draws those comics. So I didn't coin that term, but I think it's a good one. But excuse me, I'm happy to be here, and it's awkward and everything, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm here with my students, which makes it a little less awkward. This will take up some of my copyright law class, but thanks so much, Ralph, and obviously deeply mutual.
So George, you're about tech and you're about what's next, and there's an absolute wave of innovation going on. Like in general, what is your call to the artists and the music industry as a whole? Like today, what's your call? What are you shouting out from the mountaintops?
That we can't, we as artists and people that work with artists can no longer abdicate the responsibility of building tools for artists, right? It's never been okay. It's now less than ever okay for tools and companies, etc., to be built without artists in the room. I won't do it. I never really did it. I won't continue on it. I won't work with companies that don't see that vantage point. I won't invest in them. I won't do any of those things. It's like riding a bike about, or reading a book about riding a bike. Like it sounds good, but the nuance of artistry, and I think you see exactly what happens when tools are built without artists in the room. I mean, you get Spotify, you get all of these companies that clearly use artistry to build, shareholder value, which, okay, but too often the artists get left out of the equation, and you don't have to look very far to see where that gets us. Human cloud.
You mentioned Spotify, but and you were the president of a label, so you were the man for a while.
Yeah.
And now you're fighting for artists, and you're fighting for the music industry, and you're fighting for change. But there's a lot of people in powerful positions. Let's talk about publishers. Let's talk about labels. Let's talk about the streaming and the tech companies. Let's talk about the PROs. And they're established gatekeepers. And according to you and my research, they don't like a lot of the changes that could happen with blockchain and with the technologies going on. How do you get past the gatekeepers?
Well, I don't pay them any attention. I mean, to me, they're not relevant in any way, right? I mean, there's the music industry that people kind of talk about, which is the three major labels and an ecosystem that increasingly is only good for an ever diminishing population of artists and stakeholders. And I have no interest or time in trying to convince them on anything. They will eventually kind of fall in line, as they always do. I can't remember who it was that said, but the music industry adopts new technology just slower than the Amish, right? So I'm old. I don't have a lot of time or a lot of swings left, and you can't. You can only kind of present things to people, but people don't do things that are against their interest, right? And so the music industry as it stands right now is working exceedingly well for the major labels, right? Exceedingly well. They've never had more of a kind of fire hose of money coming at them, but their place as what I deem as rent seekers has never been higher, right? They are doing less and less for more and more artists every day, and reaping benefits based on structural racism and all sorts of things that allowed them to get rights for dominantly perpetuity at this point, because they ignore things like the 35-year Copyright Revision Act. So I learned a long time ago that if I was going to affect change, it was not going to be in the institutions, right? I have deep skepticism for the institutions. And so for me, yeah, Ryko was cool, and I didn't start Ryko. I mean, some people much smarter than I did, but I did try to keep its values intact as long as I could. And then when I left Ryko, and the sale of Ryko was a really painful kind of experience, and it was essentially bought by JP Morgan and then sold to Warner's. But then I co-founded TuneCore, and I give all the credit to Jeff Price. But for me, that was a real eye-opening experience about how you could affect change just by not giving two shits about the incumbents, right? And TuneCore's paid out over $1 billion to artists now, right? So I got interested in decentralized ledger or blockchain technology after reading the Satoshi white paper, and not just because of the crypto element, but because like everything else in my life, I felt like, wow, this could be a tool that could really be a net positive for artists. And I watched, not in any sense of bewilderment or surprise, but watched just like the whole first kind of class of so-called crypto innovators in the music space, like rush to try to do deals with the majors. And I mean, I would give these speeches about, like, to anyone who listened to me, and write books and articles, like, don't do that, right? All that they're doing is what I'd call sandbagging, where they would say, you know, they're getting upward pressure from people, investors, whatever, like, oh, you need to investigate this. But they weren't able to see the positive sum implications of it. And they're happy the way they are. And so you get this kind of first wave of entrepreneurs trying to do deals with the majors or the PRs or whatever. And they kind of do it, right? They kind of say, okay, well, yeah, let's do an experiment. And they sandbag. And then they'd say, well, no, it didn't work, so therefore crypto is bad or whatever. And of course, that's bullshit. That's what they always do, right? And so I've been down that road so many times. I know what their gambit is. And it's not interesting. It's the same gambit that the MLC is doing right now, and the Music Modernization Act. None of those things are in the slightest bit beneficial to 99.9% of the artists that you and I care about. So I've decided to go about it a different way. And the good news is that for the true believers like myself, and the people that have been doing this for a long time and aren't just kind of speculators in crypto land, there's an ever increasing number of technologies that really are going to change the entire landscape of the music industry. And yeah, I mean, the majors will probably end up the beneficiaries of it to a certain degree, because they hold the IP. But that said, it's going to happen faster than they think. I mean, when I started writing about crypto, I would say that we'll know that blockchain technology has adopted when we stop saying the motherfucking word blockchain. And nobody really talks about blockchain so much. Now they talk about NFTs and social tokens. The reality is there is no NFT without a blockchain. There is no social token without a blockchain. So, you know, a lot, I guess, to unpack there. But the bottom line is, I would encourage any kind of younger person, or really anyone that wants to have a satisfying career in the music industry and isn't just trying to get a paycheck, to fuck the majors, right? There's nothing interesting going on there at all.
Okay, so we're going to end right there, George. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Listen,
you buy the ticket, you take the ride, right, Ralph? I mean,
I love it.
Nobody invites me to speak and then thinks that I'm going to just play. I mean, we buy the ticket, you take the ride.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. But I want to back up a little bit. And you and I teach Music Business 101 here at Berkeley. How do you explain blockchain to the students? And then they're going to get a question about Bitcoin. And last time I get a gallon of gas at my gas station, the guy had a Bitcoin machine, ATM, in the gas station. He told me how much money he made. Give us the everyday version of what this blockchain is, the technology, and just so we're all on the same page.
So at its core, blockchain, you can think of it as kind of there's argument whether or not it's a ledger or a database, and it's not worth anyone's time to distinguish. Think of it as a database with certain superpowers. One of the superpowers is that it's decentralized. And what that means is that no particular institution or company or whatever owns it, and therefore it can't just kind of it can't crumble. If you think of something like MySpace and all of the brand equity that was put onto MySpace through artists, et cetera, and then it just kind of gone. And the same thing will happen eventually to Facebook or Twitter. The same thing has happened to many labels, where the databases are owned or controlled, and then they get bought by other companies, et cetera. So when you decentralize, no, blockchain isn't gambling. I don't know who Glenn is, but you're wrong. But so when you decentralize something, it allows for the power not to be kind of consolidated with one institution. Secondly, they're the records that are kept on blockchain are what's known as immutable. So when you put something on it, it can't change. You can add to it. It's kind of like with Wikipedia, you can see the changelog. And so that creates an audit trail that allows you to kind of actually see the claim of title. And this is really important, not just for audit reasons, but I'm as interested in the moral, ethical, political, racial implications of blockchain as I am the technological. And what I mean by that is, the American music industry, and therefore the world's music industry, was built on a foundation of racism, right? So much of the early music that kind of built our industry was misappropriated without credit. One of the things that from Black people by white people, right? And so one of the things that the blockchain does is provide for an actual record of truth and creation. And so having that audit trail goes much more. I mean, technology for technology's sake is worthless, right? I'm a believer in Clarke's third law, which is sufficient technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so it's magic to think that we can have a tool that will not only keep track of who wrote the melody and lyric of a song and who performed it, but also the fact that James Jamerson or someone of his, genius, who has really done more for the music business than most people know, and most people don't know his name, and he didn't get the credit for it, could not only receive accurate payment for his contribution, but also stature, because I mean, it's why I wrote the book, right? Your stature and putting it out there is currency, right? And so if you take somebody's credit away from them, they don't have, of course, appropriation still going on. If you take somebody's stature or credit from them, then they can't navigate in the same way. And typically stature and credit has accrued to the benefit of white males. And again, look where that's gotten us, right? And I say that as a white male. Like we undeniably need more inputs from a more pluralized kind of set of stakeholders. And so this allows for that too. So the second superpower of blockchain is that immutability. The third, and this gets over talked about, but blockchain is just code. And so the genius of Satoshi, whether it's a he or they or whatever, was that he was able to say, well, we're going to need some source of truth if we want to exchange assets in code. So he built onto Bitcoin a way to do that, and it's called proof of work mining, which is essentially kind of solving a puzzle in order to verify that you actually own something. And so what that's been lumped under this term of art called a smart contract. And what a smart contract is really an if this, then that routine. If you do something, then something else can happen. So when I read the Satoshi white paper, I thought, wow, if you can do that with money, why not do it with culture? Why not do it with copyrights? And if you can prove that you wrote something and then you create a set of rules that say, I would like somebody else to have the opportunity to use this and pay me for it, and they do that, you can unlock those rights through this so-called smart contract without the series of intermediaries and gatekeepers. I mean, if you look at music licensing today, and I'm a principal in a licensing company, and you try to get a song licensed for film or TV, the analogy I use is it's like booking travel in 1975. It's outdated, it's outmoded. You need to know the right phone numbers. It takes forever. It's expensive. There's a whole bunch of people in between, and that shouldn't be that way. And the thing again about that is that the benefits of that just accrue to the existing stakeholders and locks out everyone. And you've got people right now and all the DSPs going, oh, hi, I think that we need to reduce the amount of money paid to artists. I mean, everybody on this call saw that, right? That the DSPs now want to pay less. So that's not a good sign, right? And so no one's going to wake up tomorrow and go, oh, I want to pay more to Spotify or whatever. So we need to expand the total addressable market. And so something like blockchain, with that immutability, with the decentralization, and with these smart contracts, allows us to start bringing in new revenue streams that aren't dependent upon major labels, aren't dependent on the DSPs. And that's what's exciting to me.
So this is something that we had to wait for, or it's going on now. This is wholesale reinvention of the music industry. like probably never before.
Maybe, I mean, I don't see it in those terms, right? I mean, it's all iterative. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, we've had disintermediation of the music industry. I mean, really going back to kind of the late 80s, early 90s with Pro Tools, right? I mean, that was the first kind of salvo across the boards, where prior to that, like if you wanted to make a record, the quid pro quo was exchanging your rights in your sound recording for perpetuity so that you can get in the studio. And Pro Tools really dramatically changed that. The labels then said, yeah, fine, but you still need us for distribution. And I and others played a small role in disintermediating that through things like Pro Tools. And then the labels would say, yeah, but you still need us for promotion and marketing. And arguably social media kind of disintermediated that. What hasn't yet been disintermediated was payment, right? Was the ability to kind of, as an artist, put your works out there in a free market manner and allow people to kind of utilize your music in a free market way and give you the right credit and compensation. So again, blockchain is just another layer on the internet that's opening up new opportunities. I do believe that we're on the eve of a real seismic change that blockchain is a part of, but that's much more of around things like Web3 and metaverse. And I know that sounds like gobbledygook and like I'm just talking a bunch of nonsense, but I'm not. And I would really, really encourage people to lean in to metaverse, to lean into Web3, because again, it's ours to define. Web 1 was really, really fucked up by skeuomorphism, by Jeff Bezos going, okay, look, we're gonna take offline selling and put it online, right? And so all the benefit really accrued to Amazon and a few others. Web 2 was fucked up by Zuckerberg, who's a bad human, right? Like he Web 2 was about kind of the social web, and we didn't decentralize it. And so then you get Facebook that is, I mean, sooner rather than later, Facebook's going to be regulated in the same way cigarettes and tobacco, alcohol is, right? I mean, it's bad. So Web 3, because of decentralization and things like that, do kind of give us our best chance to redesign it from a bottoms up kind of artist-centric way. And I want to be clear. Yeah, I mean, my biases are clear against the labels. I'm skeptical of institutions generally, but this is a positive sum thing. Like nothing that I'm saying in any way should be a negative for the labels, the publishers, et cetera. If they would lean into this, they would see that this is a wonderful thing for them, but they can't get their heads out of their asses.
So it has to do with the fact that transparency is kind of what we're leaning towards, all right? With examples like Cobalt and other people, like transparency and quick payments.
Maybe, but I mean, Cobalt, like it's a sad commentary in the industry that a company like Cobalt, and think what you will of them, but can accrue market share just by saying, hey, yeah, we're a little bit more transparent than everyone else. I mean, all that says is, well, everyone else is not transparent. And so, yeah, I mean, transparency is good, but to me, it's bigger than that. To me, it's much more about empowering the artists. Like, we shouldn't have 4 streaming services. We should have 4 million. And you should have one, and I should have one. That's what the Song That Owns Itself is about. The Song That Owns Itself, I was fortunate to work with a group called the Glitch Mob, and they wrote a song. They then assigned the rights to that song to something known as a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And so a DAO is essentially a partnership agreement that is in code, right? And so that code means that humans can't fuck it up. The money comes in, the DAO looks at the money and spits it out in the right way. I registered that DAO in Wyoming. It is officially sanctioned. It has the rule of law behind it. Wyoming's the first state in the union that will allow for the registration of DAOs. And so what we did was we created a set of smart contracts that said if anyone, whether it's a label, a distributor, a PR person, does something that this Song That Owns Itself wants, then that person will get a social token that gains access to other things. But most importantly, in the community that always gets left out of the conversation with art are the fans, right? So I'm a big believer in this idea of net promoter score, right? And so net promoter score is the test that all businesses kind of have to ask, how likely is somebody that uses your product or service to recommend it to a friend. And I coined this term a couple years ago called the most passionate percentile, which is just a kind of extrapolation of a Pareto principle, right? Where say 10% of 90% of all of the good energy, all of the promotion will come from 10% of your fans. However, it's hard to identify those, right? So if you're a band, you know that like you've got this most passionate percentile of people that are pushing for you, but you can't find them, and you can't, now you can through social tokens. So with Song That Owns Itself, when someone tweets out about it, when someone puts it on Instagram, they are then recognized by the DAO as giving the song what it wants, and the song wants to be heard by the most amount of the right people, and then they're rewarded with these social tokens that give them more access. This sounds a little, maybe science fiction or something. It's not. It's live. It's happening right now. I believe that in the next year to 3 years, all songs will be NFTs, and because what that does is it allows for everyone to have clear sense of the title of the song. Think of an NFT as like a car is to a title as a song is to an NFT, right? So the NFT delineates the rules and the ownership, and it's put on an immutable blockchain, but it can then also offer these kind of licensing opportunities. So, we as a society kind of stand back and allow ASCAP and BMI and others to model rather than measure actual songs. I mean, if I owned a taco shop and all I wanted to do was play the Texas Tornadoes 24/7, eventually I'd get a knock on the door from ASCAP or BMI saying, well, you have to pay us a licensing fee so you can play anything you want. And I'll say, but I just want to play the Texas Tornadoes. And they go, yeah, but now you can play Coldplay. And I go, well, I don't fucking want to play Coldplay, and then if I asked them and they answered honestly, I said, well, if I pay this licensing fee, how much of the money would actually get to the Texas Tornadoes? And the answer is zero, right? But Coldplay would get paid. Like that's just not a society I want to live in. Think of, you will, what Coldplay or Texas Tornadoes, but like, why would we keep doing this when we don't have to? The technology exists. So something like the Song That Owns Itself will allow for people to see, oh, these are the people that are supporting this. We're going to reward them, which then provides line of sight for the band to go, we need to superpower these fans and give them more. It's really natural. And that's the thing that frustrates me. Like, a lot of this talk seems very esoteric and scientific, and it's really just allowing humans to act the way they normally do. I mean, I would challenge anybody to think about who their favorite artist is, what their favorite movie is, what their favorite restaurant is, and ask if they found out about that through marketing or through a friend. And I'd say 90% of the time it's the friend. This just allows for that to be choreographed and kept track of in a much better way.
So the Song That Owns Itself, that's up and running as of what, a year ago or something, or less?
Not
George?
quite 6 months ago, and we're about to do more. I mean, my goal, and I'm talking to some amazing people right now. I want the next Song That Owns Itself to be from an artist like Slick Rick, or from somebody, so it can't be from a white male, right? Because again, so much of this is a commentary on, look, we need to do a whole lot better at acknowledging the creation kind of in the creators, and giving credit where credit is due. I mean, we're talking to Pussy Riot, we're talking to other people. Eventually, like, the Song That Owns Itself is a platform. And as WordPress is to writing, I want the Song That Owns Itself to be for musicians, for DAOs. It's right now you can onboard and create your own DAO using the tools that are out there. It's all open source. I mean, all of the code that I write, all of the code with the people that I work with, it's all open source. It's not, we're not trying to keep any of this. I hope people take it and build on it.
And somebody put the information on the chat so you could take a look at it. And there's a really good 10-minute interview with George and the other founders about it, which kind of explains it.
And there's a white paper, and there's some materials. Yeah.
White paper is really good, by the way. And the credits, that's good reading material. And then you came up to me today with Algorand.
Algorand.
That's
Algorand.
Algorand, and it's a Singapore-based company.
No. They're in Boston. So Algorand is a blockchain. It was founded by a guy named Silvio Macaulay. And Silvio is an MIT professor. He's been there for 40 years. He won the Turing Prize. And Algorand, to my mind, is one of the most significant blockchains out there. And I have the great honor to be their artist and advisor. And so I signed up, and it's the first. I've done obviously a lot of work with other blockchains. I did something with Intel many years ago on a secondary market on their blockchain called Sawtooth Lake. But I signed up with Algorand because they have a commitment to the environment. And so one of the issues currently with Ethereum is that there's a quite a big kind of carbon footprint when you validate a transaction on a blockchain because of proof of work. Algorand uses a kind of variant on the proof of stake model, and it has no carbon. It's actually carbon positive. In other words, like it is a net positive for the environment. And so for me as a human, that's important. But it's also just from a pure business perspective. Like I can't go to artists who just kind of axiomatically have a bent towards environmental concerns and say, hey, let's NFT all of your songs if that's going to like burn down the Amazon rainforest. Whether or not that actually will or won't it is up for debate. And I actually think that the climate problems will much more likely be solved by things like blockchain because of the incentives than they will by governmental attempts. But as it may, the Algorand blockchain has no carbon negative elements, and they're deeply committed to the arts. And Silvio, like myself, believes that art is that you're kind of say that kind of empathy machine. It's tough, and I haven't acknowledged this publicly very often, but I think it's important that I do. I'm on the Asperger's spectrum, and so I empathy is something that's tricky for me, and it's something where I look at music and literature as almost like an instruction manual, right? And so that empathy building is very real. It's very, it's something where when we can't understand humans, art helps us do that. And for some of us, and I'm going to be spending a lot more of my time, trying to work with other people who have it. I mean, I'm obviously a relatively it depends on who you ask, but I'm relatively high functioning. But it's amazing to me when I spend time with people that are severely autistic and Aspergery. Like when we talk about music, when we experience music, like there's no barriers of understanding, and it's beautiful. It makes me deeply emotional, and so I have alexithymia where I have trouble with emotions, and so music and literature and those types of things, getting that out there more emphatically is really life or death for some people. It's like an instruction manual. And so Silvio, the genius behind Algorand, like I think he sees that. I think he sees that using art and prioritizing that in the same way we also work on things like land title and other things that can really be solved by blockchain is important. And that's just kind of how I view the world. I don't see them as separate.
Yeah. George, Kevin was talking about, should we try to stop fixing streaming and just start over? Is that what you're saying with all these new technologies and how to implement them?
Well, we could. I mean, I wrote about it, and it's like I say, I'm quite literally an open book. But I mean, my dream, and it may be closer than people might think, is for there to be a streaming service that is a DAO that is owned, at least in part or in a majority sense, by the artists and by the community. Right. That's where we need to go, to a form of, like, if the community truly values art. We have this, we saw with COVID, right? Like when in the heat of COVID, where cities were losing their cultural kind of heft, restaurants were closing, music venues were closing, like what's left? And you're left with a bunch of banks, you're left with, and nobody really wants to live there. So if we look at society and Web3 or whatever as empowering society generally, you look at Latin America and Algorand, and I don't want this to sound like a commercial for Algorand, but I do hope more people are aware of it. Algorand they were the ones that brought Bitcoin to El Salvador. And so if you think, well, we can use this new technology to get the unbanked banked, which is really important, right? Like as long as there are all these people that are unbanked, the poverty cycles just go on and on and on. And the World Bank will never solve it. They're like the record labels say, if they solved it, they wouldn't have a reason to exist. So, having someone come in and help kind of get the unbanked banked, and then think, well, how do we also kind of get rid of some of the cultural bankruptcies and make music streaming service more of a community owned mechanism through a DAO, that's, to me, that's within our grasp, right? Spotify's not gonna do that. I mean, Daniel Ek wants to buy a motherfucking soccer team, right? So like, and people should be skeptical of that, right? Like if the CEO of the biggest streaming service and arguably the biggest, music company out there, if he has the time to tweet and buy a soccer team while at the same time trying to pay artists less money, like if I'm the only one that causes cognitive dissonance for, I'm just not thinking right, I guess. But that's not the way. That's not the world I want to live in.
But George, he's not going into space. Give him a break.
Why do they have to make this rocket look like such massive cocks, right? Like, I mean, that was intentional, right? They were just like so weird. I don't understand.
George, Corey has a question. Do you know any open source information for complete blockchain integration for the music industry?
What? A complete
Blockchain integration for the music industry. Is there an open source information for that? Is there a place to go?
Well, it's everywhere. I mean, I think that's too broad a question. I mean, you can give people my email, and I'm happy to answer, but I can't answer. I mean, there's open source stuff. Most blockchains are open source. Most of them are under MIT licenses. But I'm happy to. That's too broad of a question.
Yeah, and George, if you go into the Q&A, Franco, who's a Berkeley grad, has a question that I rather you read. Can
it's really long.
Yeah.
How do you achieve a truly decentralized system when there's still set companies like Rally, OpenSea, for profit? What stops the owners of Yellow Heart? Oh, I get what you're going. I guess my best comparison I'm trying to ask would be the Sony AWOL acquisition. No, it's hi Franco. Well, it's a business decision, right? Like, so you have to either believe that you can have a better business through interoperability and not trying to kind of protect your little innovation. We've lived forever in this kind of Darwinian model of, for me to win, you have to lose. And that made sense for a long time when we were a society with scarce resources, but we're not anymore, right? Like anyone who dies of, well, I mean, think about COVID, right? Like anyone who dies from COVID today, because they've been unvaccinated, is doing so from a political reason, not because they have lack access to a vaccine. Anybody that wants to get vaccinated, at least in the States, can, right? And so if you die from COVID because you weren't vaccinated, that's a political choice. And so the same thing is true with food, right? Like if people are dying of starvation today, that's because some dictator has decided to leverage that for power, right? Same with money. And so the great science fiction writer, William Gibson, says the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So if we continue to operate in a very binary modal, I win, you lose, then we'll get what we have now, which is a huge concentration of wealth in the hands of a very small number of people. And those people will become insanely more rich while more and more people struggle. On the other hand, if you go towards interoperability, you can increase the wealth for all, right? I mean, we don't, even if you don't know anything about crypto, you must see that we have, over the course of the year since Satoshi's white paper, Bitcoin is the single most successful startup of all time. Its business plan was put out there for anyone to see. You needed it took zero investment capital in, and it has created more wealth than anything that I can think of. Let's do more of that. Certainly there will be people that co-opt that technology and do it in a siloed way. Okay, I mean, but you don't have to, and you can do very well without doing that. And so always people will let their lesser instincts take them to the worst places. But if we aimed a little higher, and there are lots of people doing it, the Web3 community is very different from the Web 1 and the Web 2 community. First, there's a lot more minorities. There's a lot more women. And second, it's much more open in terms of information. Going back to the other question about where the open source code for the blockchain is or something, I don't know. But I promise that person, if you do a little bit of homework, find the Discord channel of interest with you and ask questions, you won't be greeted with the answers that you would have gotten from Web 1 or Web 2, which just read the fucking manual or whatever. You will get people that genuinely want to help you, like I do. Like I don't want to do this. I hate this. Like I love Ralph, but nobody needs to hear me talk about anything anymore. I just feel like it's important, you know?
Hey, George, so when I was reading your book, a lot of the articles started in 2015.
Yeah.
And the book came out a couple years later, and I'm reading it now. And a lot of people that I've been talking to have the book, and maybe they didn't read it. Now, do you walk around completely frustrated about the lack of people, especially in the industry, knowing what this future looks like and adopting the technology and trusting the technology? Or
No, I'm happy. Like I'm so happy. I wake up every morning so excited, and I go through the day and I'm just like, I like marvel at the shit that I get to do every day. It's like, what mischief am I going to get up today? Good mischief, right? And like it's kind of like I've reached a level in my life, like when someone's an asshole to me, like I don't get mad at them anymore like I used to. And now I just go, gosh, I wonder what terrible thing happened to you in your life that would cause you to be feeling such pain that you would derive joy out of making someone else feel small. And so if somebody wants to have a fixed mindset and not a growth mindset, I just feel kind of sad. Like I just feel like, well, that's a bummer, man. Like the great Western disease is like, I'll be happy when, and like I'm so happy. I can't believe it. I can't believe, like I smile, like in bed, I'll lie there and smile, you know, and so I it makes me think what is the right, again, going back to like autism, where like what are the right words that I need to say to make somebody else feel good enough about themselves to go, well, I want to look at this not from a stance of fear or like this, you know, but just like curiosity, just like this might be cool, maybe it's not, you know. But so I don't get, I suffer fools very poorly, but only insofar as that, like I just leave now. I don't try to convince them. I just kind of, I have pain in my heart, and then I just leave, you know, and I leave conversations, and I leave, and then I go do something that brings me joy and work with people that bring me joy, you know.
So, George,
My life,
I know quite a bit about you and your career, but I've read about 3 or 4 bios, and every single time it's a different company that you started, or a different company you're working on, or a different publication you're writing in. And so I'm trying to keep track of you, but I keep on coming back to the question, like, how do you have time for this? Like, you're writing books and articles, and you're researching, you're starting companies, you're advising companies. Last year or before the pandemic, you were going back and forth to Europe all the time.
yeah.
How do you work your time?
Because it's you know, I can't pronounce the guy's name, but you know the book Flow, you know, and he talks about how like runner's high and things like that. Like I don't know. It's what I do. Like, again, going back to Bertus and REM, I remember on their last tour, like Michael would stand on the stage and he would say, "Hi, we're REM, and this is what we do." And what I do is try to help artists create sustainable careers. And I'm the luckiest person in the world. And I've studied it. Like I went to school, I went to law school, I got an MBA, I ran labels, I did those things, I read books, I put in the time, you know, but I'm a guitar player, you know, and so to me, it's like every time I get to start a company or advise a company or an artist or whatever, that's just me playing my instrument, you know, and so right now the world seems to want whatever nonsense it is that I'm selling. So I'm going to go as fast as I can. You know, like right now, yeah, I can get companies funded really easily, and I've invested. You know, I mean, I've done okay, and so I'm going to do that until I can't, and then when I can't, I'll sit by the river and play guitar. You know, it's all beautiful.
I love that. So listen, I just have 1 more or 2 more questions, and there seems to be a tipping point with that the industry is waking up to this technology. But what you want is the artist to wake up to the technology. because
Well,
there's been
yeah.
seismic changes with the Googles and the Amazons and the Apples and things like that. And the artists have built these on their backs, but they haven't participated. So your dream is to have the artists participate from day one.
It's not just a dream, right? Like, and I think that's important. It's like, and I'd encourage everyone, like, it's if you have this kind of imperative, right? Like you have, I always say purpose, not product, right? And so like my purpose is helping artists create sustainable careers. Well, to that point, exactly, like artists creating sustainable careers on their own terms, they have to be involved in the making of the tools, right? In the same way you see like Martin guitars or Taylor guitars, like, you know, that they've got guitar players sitting there going, well, I don't know, you should do this. Like Johnny Marr, like he was like, I don't know, do this. Kurt Cobain, do this. You know, they should be doing that in business. So one of the things I'm doing with Algorand that I'm super proud of is doing an artist council. And we're going to have an event in Miami around right before Art Basel. And I'm going to invite people that I've been lucky enough to kind of cross paths with, to put them in a room and say, okay, you guys are all artists, and I'm not just musicians. Like I want poets, I want novelists, I want mimes, it's all the same to me, right? And say, well, what do you need? You know, because we don't ask that enough. And then I can share my particular nonsense on business structures and tech or whatever. And then we have that plurality of conversation. And too often, I think artists are like patted on the head and say, oh, you don't need to understand this. and you know, just bad, because then they don't understand contracts, they don't understand things like that, and then they get hurt. And so, yeah, I'm deeply focused on things like artist councils and really listening, like leaning in and listening and trying to not do that terrible kind of Dunning-Kruger thing where just because I know one thing, I can apply that knowledge to something else. Like that's so bad. We've all seen it. We've all seen, you know, the wealthy person from whatever industry who goes, I know X and Y, and so now I'm going to fix the music industry, and that's Dunning-Kruger at its height. And so I'm not going to do that. You know,
Are you worried that these startup businesses, especially tech businesses, will be the next Facebook or Spotify, and they'll get so big and so powerful that they'll be the new major labels?
Could be. I mean, you know, I think what crypto generally is doing is that decentralization, the distribution of power. I mean, if you see what's happening in the finance world, like DeFi is a real thing where you start kind of stripping away these institutional power and putting it back in the individuals. I think it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle, right? You know, countries will and can try to ban things like crypto or whatever, but they can't ban blockchains, right? And they can't ban kind of communities of governance in ways that are more transparent. But it is a decision. I think people need to educate themselves. It's frustrating to me to see otherwise. I think good-hearted people like Elizabeth Warren just be so completely wrong about crypto, right? Like she clearly fights for the people that I fight for to a certain degree, and yet she still views crypto as like the purview of kind of drug dealers or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with drugs, you know, but like we need to educate a little better. And so I'll keep writing books.
So George, because we're both teachers, I'd like to ask you a final question. What do we say to our students about the future of the business? And you know, you have 2 kids. Do you want them to be in the music industry? Do you want them to have a life of a musician?
Oh, I just want my kids to be healthy and happy. I mean, I made a promise to myself. It's like, you know, with my kids, I don't care what they do so long as they're happy and healthy. And
but how about the students behind you? How about the students behind you?
Yeah, so for my students, I feel like I have one job as a teacher, and my teacher is that for the students that come through my class and give me the honor of their time and the honor to be inspired by them on a daily basis, because I am, and I learn more from them than they ever will of me. But my job to be done, as I see it, is to increase their confidence just a little bit, because that's all it is, right? If they leave Berkeley and they feel a little bit more confident about their own innate ability, which I know they already have, it just gets beaten out of people, or they beat it out of themselves, then they're going to do fine, you know, and I'm not in the slightest bit worried about them, whether or not that fine will be in the music industry, the arts. I hope so, because I think that's important, and I think that they're uniquely positioned to do so. But it really is about that confidence. I always say, you know, when I'm fighting depression or when I see my students fighting things like that, I implore them to make things, right? I think that we have a human imperative to make things, and it's in the moments of creation in which we find transcendence and kind of bliss. And part of making things is getting out of that imposter syndrome and feeling like you deserve that the things that you make deserve to be there. And I know for my students, they do. And I believe that for humanity generally. So I'm just trying to kind of give them that runway of confidence to make more things.
I love that. And you know, George, mine is similar. I just want to set off sparks, and you've been an amazing brother to me, and I'm so glad we had this time with you. If so, like, you know, if you Google George Howard, you're going to get a lot of murders and people in jail and car accidents, but you might get this guy too. Everything in the right place.
And it's right place, the Radiohead title. And I got their permission, by the way.
Do you have a website, George, that you want to?
You can just follow me on Twitter. It's GAH650, and that has links to all my nonsense. GAH650. Great.
Tom, thank you for allowing me to ask these questions to George. Like, you know, I think the world of this guy. And, you know, I tell my students that these are dark days, and there a lot of them are graduating this semester or next semester, and they're going out to the music industry and they want to have these careers. And it's people like George that are fighting the good fight, you know, all day long. And it gives me a positive direction and brings a lot of light to the way I treat my students when they're freaking out about the music industry. So George, thank you for that. Keep going, George.
Ralph, thank you, man. I mean, you bring light. Like you're who I want to be when I grow up. You know, like you have that ability to like make people feel really comfortable and warm, and like you're amazing. Like I should be asking you questions, you know, but I'm honored for this opportunity, and thank you, Tom, for this opportunity, and thank you everyone who I didn't offend, and hope to talk to some of you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hey, let me just say thank you on behalf of the audience to both of you. George, you are the smartest guy in the room, no denying that. And Ralph, thank you so much for bringing him to the audience here. The feedback in the chat today, and my phone is blowing up here, it's been remarkable. So thank you. To the audience, please keep tuning in. I sign off with the same, message every time, and that is get a frickin' shot as soon as you can. Be nice to each other, and we'll all be out there in front of some live music soon. Be safe, folks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Tom.